is our BBJ Boardroom Roundtable panel. This is the one moment of the morning when I wish I was an octopus and had an extra arm, but I can cope with this. So we've established kind of the framework for what we're going to be talking about. I think what will normally we focus on the macroeconomics because it's obvious that that's what we would do. But I think today is different and that we need to start in a different place. So Tamas, if you don't mind, I'll start with you. For anyone who lives in Hungary and has been driving around the last, I guess, couple of months, you might be forgiven for thinking that this was a national election. It's not. It was municipal elections, which are important, and European elections, which are also important. What do you think, now that we've got past the voting, what do you think the results of that will do for the power dynamics in Hungary? So do we think they're going to strengthen the government, weaken the government? Is it entirely neutral? And I had one rider to that, which is we are nowhere near, if things go according to plan, and life has taught us recently that that's not always the case, but we are nowhere near a general election. That's 2 and a bit years away. So clearly there is time for all of this to dissipate and wash away. But what do we think the European elections mean for Hungary's domestic politics?
Thank you very much, Robin. This election was clearly a lot more interesting than people were expecting it to be. Let's put it this way. So the effects of this election is going to be far-reaching, I believe, when we speak about the Hungarian political landscape, and also this will influence the Hungarian economy. So why do I say that? Because there is a political group that came out of nowhere, a very recent development. So we didn't have the situation where the governing coalition was against the traditional opposition parties, but there was a new opposition party formed, the Tisza party, which is Respect and Freedom Party, which is not to be mistaken by the river Tisza. So which was used as a vehicle for an individual who came from the right side, let's put it this way, of the political arena, and coming with a brand new proposition in Hungary, and what we saw on Sunday, or very early Monday. Many people didn't sleep much, I can tell you that. Monday was not a very effective day in Hungary, but the governing coalition is still very strong, but with a little bit less votes than they used to get in national elections, and also European or even municipality elections. The traditional opposition parties were also weakened, significantly weakened, like the Democratic Coalition, Hungarian Socialist Party, and Momentum, what I would also list amongst the traditional opposition parties. So it was a very difficult election for them with not so good results. But the new party received a significant amount of votes, and they will have a very strong representation in the European Parliament, which is a totally new situation for the Hungarian political landscape. And it's very difficult to predict the effects of that, but there will be effects for sure.
Just to pick up on one point from that, so the Fidesz Christian Democrat alliance did less well than it would have liked, but it didn't do as poorly as the opposition did. And if we talk about the European Parliament, and Ambassador, I'm going to come to you in a moment on that. I think I'm right in saying that the Tisza party will plan to join the EPP, which Fidesz used to be part of. So there's an interesting dynamic at European level about Hungarian politics there. Is that, first of all, can you confirm, am I right about my reading that they're going to go to the EPP?
You're absolutely right. This is, and my understanding is also that this is their goal, but there is one interesting factor to that. The smaller coalition party, the Hungarian Christian Democrats, are also part of the EPP. Yeah, so Fidesz is not part of that party anymore, any longer, but the smaller coalition party is. So it's going to be very interesting to see them cooperating within the EPP with the Tisza party and the Hungarian Christian Democrats.
You and I were talking beforehand about who does the heavy lifting in that particular alliance between Fidesz and the Christian Democrats. I must admit, I wasn't aware that the Christian Democrats were still part of the EPP. I assumed that when Fidesz left, they followed, but there you go. Ambassador, I know that like the good ambassador you are, you don't want to be drawn into talking about Hungarian domestic politics, and frankly, no one would blame you for that at all. Tamas has to. So, leaving that to one side, do you think that European politics is markedly different today to what it was on Sunday? We knew that the far right was growing. People expected its vote share to grow. I think people have been surprised by how much it grew. So, do you see changes on the European level, European Parliament level? Sorry.
Well, thank you. First of all, good morning, everyone, and thank you, Robin and BBJ, for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here. Good morning, Tamas. Yes, I will refrain from commenting on internal politics, certainly in Hungary and even in other EU member states. But let me say that I'm really surprised to see and pleasantly surprised that the turnout in the election in Hungary was really record breaking in history. I think this is a very positive thing that we can really, I think, analyze in a positive way, and I think it gives us a lot of optimism at the same time. Turning to the European Parliament, yes, we did expect a rise of the right, but maybe on the whole we saw that as well, but not as much maybe as we had expected. I think that the centre party, certainly the EPP, maintained its strength and even increased it. There was some erosion of the social democratic, liberal, green parties, and the right parties, they really gained some seats. But on the whole, I have the impression that the balance in the European Parliament has not changed dramatically. So maybe less than was expected. So I wouldn't now jump to the conclusion that we are in front of a completely new situation. Mm-hmm. For the rest, I think it's still early days. There are a lot of, we are I think 2 days after the election. There are a lot of consultations that are being held now. They are only starting. I suppose a lot of political parties and groups will be talking to each other, and these talks will increase in the next couple of weeks. Also, as consultations will increase as regards important appointments in the institutions. First of all, for the new European Commission President, which we hope might be proposed by the end of this month by the European Council. So I think it's early days to tell now which groups will be formed. There might be some changes, we don't know yet. But on the whole, I have the impression that the composition of the European Parliament hasn't changed that dramatically.
You mentioned the European president there, and we were talking beforehand. And you reminded me of something I should have been aware of, which is that you know, obviously we will have a new president. But can you talk us through the time frame? So ideally that will be sooner, but potentially it could be later. It could be quite drawn out.
Well, normally we would expect the European Council to arrive at a decision this month. You know, there is an informal dinner planned in Brussels next week, the 17th, which we think will be the first round. And then there is the formal European Council meeting that will be held in Brussels on the 27th and the 28th of June. And we would expect the decision to be taken then. Of course, this is a proposal. It will go to the new European Parliament that will have to confirm the appointment. This is how we expect things to go. Now, of course, we also know that in France there are going to be elections on the 30th of June, and that will be an election in 2 rounds. So it will be interesting to see what the dynamics will be also around the table at the European Council. But I mean, it's just speculation. I think I wouldn't jump to conclusions. I think everyone has an interest in having the EU institutions up and running as soon as possible. And I think everybody will try to do so. And the European Commission President should be appointed before and confirmed before the summer recess, so that the appointments of the other members of the European Commission could be done during autumn, September, October, and that the European Commission could start working maybe November. This would be probably the earlier scenario, and maybe it will be December, we will see. If it is not possible to appoint a European Commission President before the summer, then we are in a different scenario. But again, I don't think that it is in the interest of anyone, and certainly not of the Hungarian presidency, for instance, to have this delayed. So I'm hopeful, and I'm quite optimistic that it will be possible.
Optimism is always good. Let me ask what may be a ridiculous question. If the European Commission may not be able to start, the new European Commission may not be able to start work until November, what happens in the meantime? Do the currently post-holding people sit until then, or
they do sit
right,
until
okay.
They do sit until. So
hopefully they will do something as well.
Well,
we will
hope.
yeah. I don't know whether the terminology in the EU context is the same, but in Belgium we would say we will have a caretaking government. So of course there will be continuity in the institutions. The current commissioners will continue to fulfill their duties. But of course, in terms of leadership and new initiatives, I think we will have to wait for the new commission to take its place.
Thank you very much for confirming that. Tamas, let's come back to you. I mean, you mentioned the Tisza party was a vehicle, and that's clearly what it was. Péter Magyar had to find a party for which he could stand at the elections. I guess there were other choices, but Tisza was the one that he landed on. And having come from almost literally nowhere, in 2-3 months, he has come an extremely long way. Do we think, and this really is crystal ball gazing, so I'll apologise for that, but do we think he's here to stay as a force? Is he something that which would be very unusual, that Fidesz have to worry about, because, to be perfectly frank, for 10 years, 12 years, they haven't really had to worry about an opposition. So do we perceive him as being a factor on the political landscape now?
I believe he's definitely a factor on the Hungarian political landscape. That no political party can have the luxury of not looking at the developments of the Tisza party. So I think everybody is watching very carefully what's happening around them. It is very early days for this movement. It's more like a movement rather than a party. The big question for the future is, and many analysts already stated that, how quickly a properly functioning party can be established out of the Tisza party if they can have really the volumes, the number of people who are actively working for the party. This will be very important for them to stay alive for a long term in the Hungarian political arena, and definitely is going to be a decisive factor for the upcoming elections, national elections in Hungary. So if they will manage to establish a real party, then they will be there. If not, then it's questionable.
The party Tisza exists as a political party. It was something that was kind of on the shelf. I assume that they were doing something at a not very big level. So he doesn't have any more hoops to go through in terms of registering Tisza. He just
all the formalities are there. Yes.
Right. Okay. So
it's about the content, the number of people actively working for the party. That's the question.
And I guess also, you know, in 2 and a bit years' time, and this really is casting forward, but in 2 and a bit years' time, we'll have general elections. If you are going to be a force, you can't just be the one guy running for prime minister. So there will have to be other politicians in all the seats. There will have to be a shadow cabinet, to use a British phrase. So there's a lot of building to do in not a huge amount of time.
That is correct, and also the big question arises, I think, for this movement now. How will they find those people, and whether these people will come from the left, or from the right, or from which direction, up or down? I mean, this is something that no one knows right now, and this is a very sensitive matter, and it's not an easy process for sure to find the individuals who are, you know, both credible and also effective in the Hungarian political landscape. But again, not an easy process for sure.
We've done a lot of talking about politics, which was inevitable. I want to try and bring it. I can't stop talking about politics, but I want to try and move the conversation to how politics interacts with the economy. In a second, Ambassador, I'd like you to perhaps explain what's going on with the Belgian government, because I think that perhaps there should be some clarity there. But before that, and if you forgive me, on a slightly bigger scale, we have these, as the Ambassador mentioned, we have these snap elections in France, which really are snap. I think it's 3 weeks' time, and I'm not sure if the date was picked to try and get it done before the Olympics, but, you know, by the way, Paris also has the Olympics in not very long. So do we think, yeah, and one would have assumed that you know, the Paris Olympics would have been good for the economy, at least of France. Now, when Macron announced the election, the Paris stock market tanked. It has since come back. It hasn't come back, at least as far as I understand my last viewing. It hadn't come back to quite where it was before, but clearly for France, there is an issue about what does the politics mean for the economy. France isn't Germany, which is the really important partner for Hungary, but it's not insignificant. So do we see economic waves rippling out from this, do you think?
You were not, okay. So I think it is very important how these new effects of the election are going to be handled. Most importantly, in these two states, so France and Germany. Germany is clearly the most important partner, not just for Hungary but for the whole CEE. I believe there are very easy to draw conclusions coming out of elections, and we have touched this briefly before we began this discussion, that the center parties were weakened a little bit, and we see movements towards the right and towards the left going more towards the far directions, which is having a message that the center parties should probably pay a bit more attention about what do the voters really want, and I was very glad to hear from Mr. Ambassador that there is hope for Hungary, right? So we have a very bad reputation many ways, but the fact that democracy is functioning is very good news, I believe, for the whole country. So we see a little bit of weakening of the Green parties as well, which is also signaling that everybody is for the transition, the green transition, but we have to do it carefully so that the economy is not endangered or put into a very difficult situation. And I believe that these conclusions are somewhere in the minds of all politicians, and trying to establish the new directions that they will go when they have these discussions between the fractions of the new European Parliament. I think we're going to have a very vibrant months ahead of us. I don't think we will find the leaders very quickly. I believe there will be big debates which will prolong the process. But this is not necessarily helpful for our economies. So my expectation is that although I believe also Western Europe and certainly Eastern Europe or Central Eastern Europe is on the way of recovery, so we see that in the GDP numbers as well, but it's not going to be a quick one. So and the political changes that we see happening almost everywhere will not support that. So this will temper or make the rebound a bit more slowly.
As we always say, business likes continuity more than anything else. Ambassador, I alluded to this, but the big political fallout, I guess, was, or the huge surprise political fallout, was Macron calling his snap election. But there was also some perhaps surprising news from the Belgian government. Perhaps you'll explain what's going on, where we are now in that process. The Prime Minister offered his resignation.
Yes, it's always a pleasure to explain Belgian politics to foreign audience, but in this case it's actually not so difficult because many of you may not know, but in Belgium we had not only European elections but also national elections, which means federal and regional elections, and it is customary and actually enshrined in law that after elections the Prime Minister resigns, offers his resignation to the head of state, to the king, which is what he did the morning after the election. So it wasn't really a political decision. It is just something that always happens in a normal phase after the morning after the elections. And of course, the head of state accepted the resignation and charged the government with taking care of running business. In the meantime, consultations are being held with a view to forming a new government. which might take a long time or not so long time. We will see. It's too early days now. But I would like to reassure everyone the Prime Minister resignation was not a political decision. It's just something normal after any national election.
Thank you very much for clarifying that. I think it's a useful clarification. Just point of order on how long it takes to form the next government. Am I right in saying that Belgium holds the world record for the longest term?
I believe we still do.
Proved that the government doesn't necessarily need politicians to work.
Well, you know, the day that the journalists started writing this, then we quickly had a government. No, I think that the Belgian context is, of course, very specific in the sense that we have a country that is a federal country. We have regions and communities that have very devolved powers, competences on many issues, which include a lot of economic issues like energy policy, employment, transport, environment issues. All these are investment and trade as well. So all these are policies that are decided at the regional level in Belgium. And if we didn't have a government for a long time, at the same time we did have regional governments who were in full competencies. So it explains also why the country doesn't collapse immediately. But of course, at a certain point, it's necessary to have a government, and everybody will agree that the sooner the better. Especially, you know, a government needs to decide on a budget, and a budget means to decide on strategic issues and investment or with a long-term vision. So for this, it is necessary also to have a federal government. And well, I personally don't think that it will take that long this time, because this time the election results may be a little bit more clearer than they used to in the past. So I'm hopeful that that this time it will go faster. It doesn't mean that we will have a government next week, but certainly I think in the near future.
Thank you very much. Let's move the conversation on to the presidency of the Council of the European Union. And my first question, I think, is sort of a technical one. The handover. So you will pass the baton on July 1st. Hungary takes over from you. Is that handover itself made more difficult by the politics? I'm thinking of your Foreign Minister Haider Labib, who relatively recently urged EU countries to deprive Hungary of its voting rights. The concerns, the reasoning behind that was the continued blocking of financial support for Ukraine, and also on the this is probably simplifying things, but also on the sanctions against Russia. So the fact that you have, and I fully appreciate you're a diplomat and a very good one and not a politician, but the fact that you have a politician saying something like that right before it, you know, the handover of the presidency, does it make life more difficult?
Well, you know, it's always easy to have politicians who don't say things like this. But on the other hand, we
every ambassador in the room is nodding now in agreement.
You know, my minister was making a political statement. I do think that she didn't mean to say something about what the presidency was going to do or not do. I think this was a little bit either misinterpreted or misrepresented. I think my minister was expressing some frustration on her part on two things. First of all, she was talking about the so-called Article 7 procedure, which is a very formal procedure foreseen by Article 7 of the Treaty on European Union. It is a rule of law procedure. And as we know, Hungary is subjected to it, and it means that the Council has to deal with it. In fact, the process was launched by the European Parliament in 2018. So this is 6 years ago. And I think my minister was expressing some frustration that this Article 7 procedure doesn't seem to be a very efficient one if we still have to deal with it 6 years after it was launched. And I think, of course, she's entitled to have this opinion, and I think it is widely shared. And I think she was making this comment also in the context of the debate that is going on about the internal reform of the European Union and the future of Europe, which means also that we have to look at the working methods, the internal working methods of the European Union. And I think she was at the same time expressing some frustration on exactly this, on working methods, on decision-making procedures in the European Union, which, as you know, are in some areas still based on unanimity. And this is certainly the case in foreign policy issues. And the frustration is that everybody wants the EU to act effectively and decisively on important foreign policy issues. But then we see that because of the unanimity rule, this is not always possible. And so I think what my minister was trying to say was that if we are talking about reforming the EU and looking at our internal working methods, we also should reflect on this unanimity decision-making process, which sometimes makes the EU not so efficient. So I think she was just expressing some frustration on that. And then, of course, both frustrations were combined. So of course, as I said, Article 7 is a rule of law procedure. It is not about foreign policy. I think every member state understands that as long as the unanimity rule exists in foreign policy, we will stick to this. And certainly as a president, we will. We may not agree with countries who veto certain decisions, but they are entitled to do so. I mean, it is a legitimate position. We may be irritated by it, but this is how it is. These are the rules in foreign policy, and maybe we will be able sooner or later to review this this decision-making procedure. We don't know this. In any case, it's my government's position to try to go around it and to find solutions to this in order to make the EU more effective. Because we shouldn't make any mistake. This is about efficiency. This is about effectiveness of EU policy making, and I think this is the goal. Article 7 is not about this. Article 7 is about the rule of law. Foreign policy issues is not rule of law, so I think we shouldn't confuse both. My minister was talking about both issues, but not necessarily in the same context.
Not necessarily at the same time.
Yeah.
I'm conscious of the fact that we've got Tamas and his mega brain there, and we haven't heard from him for a while. So I'll bring you in a second, Tamas, I promise. I'm going to combine two questions in one for you, Ambassador. What have been, because we're nearly at the end of the process for you now, what have been the highlights of the Belgian presidency, and what do you want to see, what would you like to see taken on by Hungary? Obviously, Hungary has its own agenda, and we'll maybe come to that, but are there issues that have not yet been finished under the Belgian presidency started that you would like to see continued, and what have been the highlights?
Well, thank you. I think Belgium and Hungary, we are taking over the presidency in a very special year, and this is because of the European elections. This is very clear to everyone. We are in the first half, we were before the elections, let's say, and it meant that there was a lot of pressure on our presidency to finalize a lot of legislative work before the European Parliament ended its activities to go into election mode. And it actually meant that we only had about 2 months or maybe 2.5 months to finalize the legislative work. And this was really the priority for our presidency. And we were supported a great deal by all member states and also by the European Parliament itself, which of course wanted to prove that they can be very effective in adopting new legislation. You have to, also maybe it's good to say this, mystify a little bit the role of the presidency. As a presidency, you are chairing the council and you have to make it work. This is our one and only real priority. But of course, there are 150 legislative files on the table, about 60 of which we thought we could finalize, and we finalized in the end 67. So we did a good job, I think. I'm not going to list all of them, but I think there were a few highlights. First of all, one of our priorities were the rule of law issues, and there is one piece of legislation that we are very proud of. It is the European Media Freedom Act, which we were able to get a deal on in the Council and with the European Parliament. I think this is a very important decision. We were also able to adopt a review of the multi-annual financial framework. This is the EU budget, the budget from 2021 to 2027, the current budget, but we reviewed it. It wasn't such an easy process, but of course everybody understands that given the ongoing war in Ukraine, we had to increase the funding to assist Ukraine, and we were able to do this also in the end with the support of the Hungarian government. But the review of the multi-annual financial framework was not only about Ukraine. There were also other measures in it, and these were economic measures to boost innovation, research and development. One of the pieces of legislation is the Strategic Technologies for Europe platform that we were able to approve. It was 10 billion euros extra, but generating probably 160 billion euros for more to boost our industry in terms of developing more new technologies for clean tech, for green transition, and other initiatives in this sector. The Net Zero Industry Act is very much along the same lines, also to boost clean tech, all around the same goal, which is to make the green transition not a burden, because it costs a lot of money. All our companies and our industries, they realize that this is a very costly policy, the climate goals. We remain committed to them, to the climate goals, but we also thought that it was important to give a priority to turning these goals into a competitive advantage. And so we are very proud on this legislation, but of course a lot needs to be done. And I'm coming to this, but this will be one of the things that we would like the Hungarian presidency to continue working on. We also reviewed the economic governance of the EU. The economic governance dates back to the financial crisis, when the Council and the European Parliament adopted new economic governance mechanisms, but we reviewed them to make budget planning more flexible and more predictable in the longer term as well. So it will enable governments to be more effective in terms of organizing their budgets and reaching their goals in terms of investment while balancing their public finances. We were also very proud of the social dimension of our presidency. Our social partners are key partners for our industry, for our companies as well, but also for our social welfare and stability. We just came out of the COVID crisis, and we all know what this meant for the health sector and for the health sector workforce, which doesn't have enough staff in many member states. So we did a lot of work and reflection on this topic, but there are also new ways of working, home office, platform work. We were able to get an agreement on the new platform work directive, for instance, which is an industry that is developing very fast, and I think the EU was now able to shape a new legislative framework for this. So this was an important dimension also of our presidency. Of course, then we finalized the Migration and Asylum Pact. It was the Spanish presidency, actually, that was very successful in getting agreement about this with the European Parliament, and we were able to finalize the legislative texts about this. So this is now fully adopted. And then, of course, in terms of foreign policy, we did a lot to step up the EU support for Ukraine. I already mentioned the Ukraine facility, which was part of the budget review, but we also assisted the High Representative in getting the 13th sanctions package approved. And there were also other foreign policy decisions, for instance, sanctions against Hamas, but also against violent Israeli settlers. There was a mission decided to guarantee the freedom of navigation in the Red Sea, which is very important also for our economy, because a lot of our trade is getting stuck there, and I think this helped also to stabilize the situation for our shipping companies and our goods getting around the globe. So I think on the whole, these from our perspective were the highlights for our presidency. Now, this is in the legislative, let's say, part, you could say the first half of our presidency. The second half was really more about strategic issues. And this will culminate now with the European Council at the end of this month. I think I can mention two important files there. The first one is the strategic agenda. It is an extremely important strategic document that will have to be adopted by the leaders at the end of June, and it will look forward to the next 5 years. It is an agenda for the next institutional cycle. It will be the basic document that the new European Commission, when it will be established, will use to base its own work program on. So it's a very strategic document. Negotiations are ongoing at the moment in Brussels, and I think that the European Council will adopt this strategic agenda for the next 5 years. And then the second one is, in terms of strategic reflection, is, I mentioned it before already, it's the roadmap for internal reform of the European Union. I haven't mentioned enlargement yet, but of course, as we know, there is going to be a new chapter on enlargement in the next couple of years. And there is a lot of work still to be done, but it also necessitates a reflection on our internal working methods. If we will be with, I don't know how many more, but a lot of more member states, then of course we have to look at our internal working methods, but not only because of enlargement. Even without enlargement, everybody agrees that with enormous global changes, with competition from China, from the United States, and so on, the EU needs to get its act together and to be more efficient and more effective. And that's also a reason why we look at our internal working methods. And the third reason is just because any organization, and certainly I don't need to explain this to business CEOs, you always have to look at your internal working methods. This is something you have to do on a daily basis, and so the EU has to do this as well. So there are three reasons why we have to launch this process. This roadmap, we hope, also will be adopted at the level of the heads of state and government at the European Council, and then going to the what we see as the agenda for the Hungarian presidency. Well, I've already mentioned two. First of all, the roadmap will need implementation. It will be there, but then, of course, the reflection and the discussions will have to start in the working groups and in the council formations, and eventually also in the European Parliament on the internal reforms for enlargement, but not only for that. And then on the strategic agenda, a lot of that will be on the competitiveness agenda. We're very happy that together with Spain and Hungary, already in our trio presidency program, competitiveness was our #1 priority. This will be also the #1 priority in the strategic agenda for the next 5 years. As Belgian presidency, together with Spain, we commissioned Enrico Letta, the former Italian Prime Minister, to write a report on with proposals, very practical proposals, and I think I would really recommend everyone to read it. It was published in March or in April, if I'm not mistaken. It's publicly available. It has a lot of very practical proposals on how to boost and strengthen the EU internal market further. And this is something, of course, that will have to be translated into concrete legislative proposals. And I think this is an agenda item for the Hungarian presidency to start working on it. We have the impression, of course, we are consulting with our Hungarian colleagues almost on a daily basis, mainly in Brussels, sometimes in Budapest as well. We have the impression that this is the #1 priority for the Hungarian government. And they will, I think, put a lot of emphasis on it, looking a lot of level playing field, looking at SMEs, because this is something that is important for this country, but also for Belgium and actually for most of the EU member states, for instance. But there are lots of other measures, and this work will have to be done. Another chapter that will be a major chapter in the strategic agenda, and that the Hungarian presidency will have to push forward, is everything that is related to the development of the defense industry. Everybody will agree that defense has never been as central as it is today on the EU agenda. Of course, this is because of the international environment. We are pushed into this direction, and we have come very far already. But we agree that the EU has to be better organized at boosting its own defense industry, at coordinating its programs, its procurement, its production. And the Commission has already, earlier this year, proposed a defense strategic plan and program. And I think there is work on the table now, and this is what the Hungarian presidency will also have to push forward. I'm sure that enlargement will be a very important priority also for the Hungarian presidency, and we agree that this has to be a merit-based process. There will probably be some intergovernmental conferences to open chapters for negotiation. We do not expect any negotiations to be finalized soon, but I think everybody agrees that this is a process that they will put a lot of effort into, and we are expecting the Hungarian presidency to organize a Western Balkan summit in the second half of this year, which will be an important moment, I think, for everyone. And then finally, Ukraine, because Ukraine will continue to need our support, and also the migration and asylum agenda. These may be topics that the Hungarian government has had a different position on, but as a presidency, the Hungarian colleagues told us that they will adopt an honest broker posture, and I think this is the best thing to do, because if you are chairing the council and you want to realize, to achieve results, and also to push forward your own priorities, you need everyone's support. You need the support of other member states, and you can only be successful if you are an honest broker. Otherwise, it won't work, and you won't get the necessary support. Of course, the transition, the new European Commission, the new European Parliament, it will cause some delays maybe, because there have to be new appointments and so on. But as I said, I mean, I listed already a number of important files. I think there is enough work on the table, so all the ingredients are there. We have the Letta report, we have the roadmap for internal reform, we have the strategic agenda, so all the ingredients are on the table, so we have to start cooking, and Hungarians are good cooks, as we know. So
the Hungarians are very good cooks. Tamas, let's start putting that mega brain to work. So, I mean, it was interesting. There were a lot of words there that are familiar in a Hungarian context. R&D, enlargement, innovation, especially competitiveness. What do you think, and defense spending, of course. What do you think will be the highlights that we should be looking out for the Hungarian presidency?
I think it was all listed already. So the EU competitiveness is clearly the #1 agenda on the Hungarian government. Defense is on it. Enlargement for long years going back. Hungary was the front runner of the supporters for enlargement. Maybe there is one that wasn't mentioned is a program for people with disabilities, and this is probably the inclusion and diversity agenda of the Hungarian government, which is clearly not about gender, which is a controversial topic in the Hungarian government's view. But I think so. Just one comment on this political difficulties. So when people are saying that Hungary shouldn't do the presidency and it should be excluded, and it should be excluded from the EU because the Hungarian government is having a different view, I think it's not a how should I say, not a situation that is easy to work with. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So because somebody is having a different view, trying to use that as a weapon is not helping cooperation. Nevertheless, there was even an initiative of the European Parliament to make it impossible for Hungary to do the presidency. I never believed that these initiatives can be successful, and nor did anybody from the administrative bodies, I believe, within the EU. So I believe Hungary is going to do a good job in the presidency. This is going to be a balancing game, clearly. So I agree with the ambassador that you have to be ready for the compromises in order to move things forward, and there are many things for Hungary important that they will move forward in the presidency. I'm very curious to see what's going to happen with the migration pact and the migration agenda, because this is a sensitive topic for Hungary. Ukraine is clearly a sensitive topic, and how we're going to move forward as the EU with Ukraine, taking into account that the Hungarian government is really trying to get peace talks running, and there are not many people, not many countries agreeing with that right now within the European Union. So it's going to be very interesting to see whether the elections will influence that in one way or the other. So this is something we don't know yet, how the new commissioners will think about it, and what will be the general sentiment, whether there will be a shift in the views of the European Union or not. So this is again something that we will see. And let me just draw the attention of the distinguished audience to two contradictions that I believe will be very interesting to see the developments of. And one contradiction is lying between competitiveness and green transition, and how we solve that. So how do we make the right moves so that we protect the environment, we are mindful of the climate change, but not lose the competitiveness of the European companies. And we are not in a very good situation with that. So the Western European companies are having some disadvantage from this perspective already, if I look at the US or China. And so how do we get out of that trap is going to be a very important, and not for the EU presidency. I think we will struggle that. We will grapple with that for longer years. And the other one, which is even more new, is data protection and generative AI. So how do we solve that difficulty? The EU is very mindful of data privacy, data protection. Some other parts of the world where this is going on in a much bigger scale than in EU, the US and China, just to name two countries that are really advanced with that, and AI as well. How can we get into a situation that we are not jeopardizing data privacy, data secrecy, but still are developing at least with the same pace as the US or China? No one knows the answer, I think, to those contradictions, and I don't know how we can find a way. But if we will not, this will mean that the EU is gonna deteriorate, and the companies operating in the EU will suffer because of this.
Thank you for that, Tamas. I mean, in some ways, you wonder whether it's a silly way of putting it, but the EU is both the best and the worst means of addressing it, because as we know from bitter experience, the EU does nothing quickly, and yet this is something that is really quite urgent. However new it is, it's not going away. The competitive issue is ongoing. The data privacy issue is ongoing. AI is accelerating massively. So it's, as you say, interesting to see how that develops. We can't do this without firmly touching on economic ground. So very, very quickly, Tamas, if I may. Inflation came down fast. Now looks like it's having a very slight uptick. What do we think is going to be happening with that? GDP, the EU's spring forecast, I think, was 10.4% GDP growth for the EU, which is just a smidge under the government prediction of 2.5. You've already talked about the possibility of the elections delaying the growth period, stretching it out. So what are your expectations for inflation and GDP for Hungary?
I believe the predictions, this 2.4, 2.5, are pretty much right. So I believe we're going to get somewhere between 2 and 3%, and next year is going to be slightly better. So probably will be above 3%. So it's a fine balance that the Hungarian government is trying to keep with the deficit, the lack of funds that the Hungarian government is facing. I don't think that we will have quick results with respect to the EU funding that is still locked, although we have a substantial amount already unlocked, and this is supporting the Hungarian economic development. I believe that the first quarter was a very successful quarter. So I think second biggest development within the European Union was taken by Hungary from a GDP point of view, and even though we saw a little bit of increase in the inflation, I don't think that this is something that we will continue to see. I believe that there will be a real wage growth fueled by a couple of things: the money that the retired population is getting, and the minimum wage increase as well, which is slightly above inflation, and this is generating a salary increase that will give us a real wage growth. But I think companies are very careful with that, and even though the employment situation is a little bit eased, so the unemployment rate is gone up a little bit, but it's still not something that is unmanageable. So I don't think that we will have a significant changes in the tightness of the employment market. Let's put it this way. So still, it is a challenge to find people. It's going to be a challenge to find people. We will still need guest workers, especially if we have the big investments that are coming in and are built as we speak. Will open up their production operations. So this is not going to happen that drastically this year, but next year. So we will see a bigger GDP increase because of this next year. But this will also help the construction business. This will also help other businesses, together with the consumption increase that we're going to see because of the people have more money and a little bit easing of the tensions as well. I believe that the above 2%, 2.5 is a good possibility for the country. Also, the interest environment is getting better and better. So the Hungarian National Bank putting the interest rate to 7.25 is something that is making people to use credits a little bit more than they did before. There was a lot of hesitation in the previous months that is also turning a little bit. So overall, I believe that we will see this slow growth in Hungary as well. Big question mark, what are the companies ordering Hungarian products and services going to do within Western Europe? So if there would be a big drop or some unexpected things happening, this could spoil the Hungarian recovery as well, because we are really dependent on that. But I don't think that this will happen. I believe that also within the European Union, we're going to see a small, very moderate growth.
And presumably, if it's small, we talked about contradictions, but there's a contradiction between wage growth and growing consumption, and the possibility that that begins to push up inflation if it's too much. So, but if we're talking about small levels, that's presumably not a great threat.
Yes, and if you look at the comparison of wages within the European Union, you see that Hungary is really modest in that respect. So even the recent data even shows that Romania may overcome Hungary at certain places already with wages. So which is, I think, so finding that balance for the producers, for the companies operating in Hungary is going to be really, really important. So, and believe me, they will be cautious. So they will try to find that balance, which is not letting the wages grow really high.
Thank you, Tamas. Ladies and gentlemen, we have covered an awful lot of ground, and we're slightly later than we'd like to be. We do try to offer the opportunity of questions from the floor. Is there anyone, bear in mind we have these great brains here. Sir, would you like to ask a question? Hang on one second, let me give you my microphone.
Thank you. Thank you very much to both panelists. My name is Alfonso Dastis. I'm the ambassador of Spain. I wanted to ask a question concerning the forthcoming Hungarian presidency of the Council and the priorities. There was one that wasn't mentioned, at least directly, which is the one of demographics, the demographic tendency in Europe, which is not very positive. Hungary is very proud of, and rightly so, of its family policy, but I don't think it's really doing, a great job. It's not being very fruitful. You yourself said that you will need more guest workers. There is a tight work market, as you said. Isn't there also a contradiction? You mentioned competitiveness and Green Deal. You mentioned data privacy and artificial intelligence and all that, between your immigration policy and the need to have more workforce dealing with the needs of competitiveness. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. I should, of course, point out that Tamas is a representative of PwC and not the government. And I guess we should also point out, of course, that the government has been in power for 12 years and has consistently tried to do something about demographics. But with the best will in the world, if it was super successful, we're probably another 10 years away from that group of people coming forward to replace the guest workers that we need today.
Yes. So as Robin said, I can offer my private view on this question, but I think you're right. There is a contradiction between Hungary's migration policy and the fact of demographics and the slowness of reproduction and the deteriorating is something that we can see. I think this is the question of the century. So this is not a Hungarian issue. This is a worldwide issue. It's an issue in Korea, in Japan, in China, in the US, in Western Europe. It's everywhere an issue. I think that we are moving into a more individualist society, which is making it challenging to have the rate at 2.1, where we have full reproduction of human resources, let's put it this way, or humans generally. I think there are some results with the Hungarian policy. So getting to 1.6 is not like nothing compared to other countries and other results. I think this is one of the better situations that we can have, but far from enough. So absolutely yes. It's a matter of choice whether you would like to solve this problem with people from outside the country, or whether you would like to solve this problem with people inside the country, which clearly seems like the preference of the Hungarian government. That doesn't say that the Hungarian government is not letting guest workers in, and it is intending to do that, I think, in the future as well. Otherwise, we will not be able to keep those big investments up and running that are happening all around the country, especially in the eastern and southern part of the country. So I believe that in a programmed manner, this will go on in the future as well. It's probably going to go on in the future until we get to a acceptable level of reproduction as a society. Whether we will get there, whether the world will support us or hinder us in that respect is the biggest question, which is full of sociology, psychology, and it's not just the measures that one government can make, but there are many other factors influencing how people are feeling, whether there is a war ongoing, which is clearly not helping this issue. So many things that no one can solve this issue on their own. I think no country can solve this issue on their own. It's a worldwide issue that needs to be dealt with somehow on a wider scale.
Thank you, Tamas. Ambassador, I think you wanted to make
just a brief remark. I think this is indeed a crucial question, and we don't have the solution immediately. I just wanted to point at the Letta report, which I just referred to, and I really recommend you reading it. It talks about the strengthening of or completing the internal market, which everybody knows is based on the 4 freedoms: goods, services, capital, and people. But Mr. Letta also said, yes, but the freedom of movement of people, we need to work on the concept, and he was even advancing the concept of the freedom to stay. Because there are regions in Europe that are getting depleted of workforce, and he's proposing a number of initiatives, and we will see where this gets at. But this really underlines the fact that for the functioning of the internal market, this is a crucial issue. So yeah, the freedom to stay. It's just one brief comment.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, I think I am going to have to end it there. We are defeated by time, but we have covered an enormous amount of ground. We learned a lot of things. We learned that the French, in reaction to the European elections, the French made a political decision, and the Belgians did not. That was a natural passing of time and office. So we've learned that quite possibly, I don't think we articulated in these words, but quite possibly this is Europe's US moment, in that there are a substantial number of voters who would naturally be in the centre, who no longer feel that politics is talking to them. And so therefore they move further to the left or further to the right. If we get somebody in the centre who can talk to them in a way that they feel they are engaged with, maybe you begin to see those voters coming back to the middle. And maybe, and it's a very big maybe, that was something that we saw at these elections. There are lots of caveats, and there's a long way to push out from that. But we certainly, for the first time, have someone who would claim that he is right of centre, who seems to be offering some kind of alternative to the Fidesz Christian Democrat alliance. Of course, it's one election, and European elections are not general elections. People vote very differently. He doesn't have a party. He has a party, but it's a one-man band of a party. So there is an awful lot of work to be done in 2.5 years if he's to take that experiment further. We've learned that the Belgians have been very happy with their presidency, that they were expecting to get 60 files through and got 67, so well done, Belgium. We've learned that ministers don't always speak in a manner which makes life easy for ambassadors, and we have, I think, 6 ambassadors with us today. You will all feel the pain of our esteemed speaker on that front. There will be a handover of the presidency. And clearly, Belgium and Hungary are 2 very different countries. But there's also a lot of similarities in the work that will go ahead, not least innovation, not least R&D, not least competitiveness, perhaps that above all others. I think that for the rest, look for the podcast. And the print work when we get round to it. There is an awful lot of information that our 2 guests have shared with us today. It probably will take some time to digest. I'd like to thank you for your attention. I'd like to apologise for running very slightly over time, but I'd like to thank also our 2 speakers from PwC Tamas Locsei and from the Belgium Embassy, Ambassador Vergeylen. Thank you very much indeed, gentlemen.
Thank you very much.